Forced. You know it when you feel it. An established franchise trying to make you accept something brand new right out of the gate. No getting to know you phase, just love me now. Star Wars tried to do it with a droid that's basically a rolling beach ball. Marvel's done it with legacy titles nobody asked to hand off. It never works. It just feels manufactured. So, with that in mind, how, Di Carabao, do you introduce a new big bad into an over 40-year-old toy franchise already stacked with Megatron, Starscream, Soundwave, and Shockwave, and make it work? Turns out, the solution was staring us right in the face. Or more precisely, something stuck onto one. Back in 2005, comic company IDW wanted to do a lot more with their newly acquired Transformers universe, chief among which was adding real depth to the Decepticon faction instead of just labeling them as a bunch of bad dudes. Their main bad guy wasn't just some greasy toothpick-chewing tyrant out to conquer the galaxy. You've heard the saying, sometimes the villain sees himself as the hero of his own story. That was definitely the case for IDW's Megatron, who saw himself not as a conqueror, but a freedom fighter, rising up for Cybertron's lower class to fight the corruption and abuse of those in power. And it was from that aspiration that the Decepticons rose, a movement whose entire concept was penned into existence by Megatron himself, a new way of life and in many ways, a religion. And like any religion, it spawned zealots, followers who viewed Megatron as more than a leader. He was a god, and they took it upon themselves to purge the cause of anyone they deemed unworthy. This was the premise of the Decepticon Justice Division, Megatron's internal secret police, a crack team of some of the most horrific, overpowered Decepticons alive, each one named after one of the first city-states to fall to the Decepticons at the dawn of the war. The ancient dialect-speaking sniper Voss, the eyeless electric chair interrogator Kaon, the gleefully sadistic furnace Helix, and his bored, apathetic shredder of a partner, Tesserus. Their collective mission, hunting down deserters and traitors within their own side and executing them. But every team needs a leader, someone to enforce direction and focus, and for a team as horrific as the DJD, that responsibility fell on an individual who embodied the cause completely. Someone who wasn't just following it, someone who wasn't anything but it. One who proudly wore the symbol of that cause directly on his face. Named after the city-state his leader originally hailed from, Tarn is Megatron's single most devoted follower, a walking, talking political pamphlet with his own fusion cannon. He's eloquent, he's cultured, he loves quoting Megatron's old philosophical writings word for word, like scripture. He plays classical music, specifically a piece called the Empyrean Suite, while his victims are being taken apart, because to him, an execution isn't murder, it's a ceremony, a cleansing, a kindness even, if you ask him. And that's the perversion right there. Tarn doesn't see himself as a monster. He sees himself as a bureaucrat. The DJD isn't a death squad to him, it's an administration. And he's just the guy filling out the paperwork correctly while everyone else in this war can't be bothered to read the manual. But strip away the polish, and Tarn is a walking contradiction. He believes he's fair, runs what he thinks is a tight, just ship. He'll even take in a stray and add them to the team if they're useful, and more importantly, loyal. And yet cross him, and Tarn goes from perfectly affable to genocidal in an instant. He's an absolute mess of a bot, doing an excellent impression of somebody who has his life together. But go beyond the savage hidden underneath layers of sophistication, and you get into what makes Tarn uniquely terrifying amongst an already terrifying team. He doesn't need a precise shot, volts of electricity, a burning furnace, or a diamond-laced grinder to kill you. All Tarn needs is his voice. Through nothing but precise control of pitch, tone, and frequency, Tarn can talk a Cybertronian calmly, conversationally, like you're having a chat over Energon, and make their own spark collapse in on itself. He doesn't torture you to death, he just talks you into stopping, which might be the single most Decepticon Justice Division sentence I've ever had to write. This guy's superpower is a really, really good performance review. So, given all of that, by all metrics and measures, I think it's a pretty fair assumption to make that Tarn was a badass dude. But as par for the course with IDW and Transformers in general, there was definitely more than meets the eye to Tarn. Unlike Lady Gaga, Tarn wasn't born this way. In fact, he wasn't even born as Tarn. And to really understand where any of this came from, we have to go back to the mask, because everything about Tarn starts and ends with that mask. Think about why people wear masks in fiction to begin with. Sometimes it's to become something bigger than themselves. Sometimes it's protection. But most of the time, when a character hides their face, it's because they're hiding something else underneath it. Not just an identity, a history, a former life they don't want anyone, maybe including themselves, looking at too closely. And Tarn's former life? He wasn't even a Decepticon. He was an Autobot. Well, sort of. He was, as he would see himself, a nobody, an outlier, a Cybertronian named Damus. And ironically, despite how he viewed himself, someone unique and special. Damus was one of the incredibly rare class of Cybertronians called Outliers, 0.1 percenters, born with strange, unpredictable abilities the old caste-based Cybertronian society didn't know what to do with. Damus's specific gift? The ability to short-circuit non-sentient machinery just by touching it. Useful, sure, except every time he used it, it hurt him. Badly. Before the Great War, Damus attended the Jiaxin Academy of Advanced Technology, hoping to keep his outlier status hidden from the Senate and the Functionist Council, who treated anyone who didn't neatly fit into a function as a threat to be managed. Unfortunately, despite his best efforts to lay low, Damus eventually crossed the Senate and was hit with their favorite tool for torturing undesirables without actually killing them, Empurata. Head and hands removed, replaced with a featureless head with a single optic and crude claws. A punishment designed to erase who you were and leave a blank slate walking around as a warning to everyone else. Despite his fate, Damus, now calling himself Glitch, in a nod to his new appearance, ended up getting recruited along with his fellow outliers by a young law enforcer named Orion Pax for special operations. And moving forward, he became closely associated with the guy who would one day become Optimus Prime. And that's the part that really stings. Glitch wasn't some stranger to the bots who'd eventually become legends. He was part of Orion Pax's circle. He fought alongside fellow outliers who themselves would become well-known Autobots like Windcharger and Trailbreaker. He was, in a very real sense, adjacent to greatness the whole time, without ever realizing it. And it was Orion Pax who, without meaning to, planted the seed that would eventually send Glitch down his own dark path. During some downtime, Glitch happened to overhear a conversation between Pax and fellow outlier Roller. Yes, I know, a familiar name. I promise I'll get to that. Pax recommended Roller check out the writings of a miner-turned-activist resonating with a good portion of the Cybertronian population, Megatron. Powerful stuff, Pax called them, a total afterthought of a comment from a guy who had no idea what he was doing or who was listening. And that one offhand recommendation stuck with Glitch a lot longer than it was ever supposed to. Megatron himself later admitted what happened next wasn't some grand recruitment of a promising warrior. It was spite. He turned Glitch, a broken, discarded Empurata nobody, because it was an efficient way to hurt Orion Pax. A petty little action that snowballed into one of the most feared enforcers in Decepticon history. Glitch got a new body, and his special gift was amplified into his signature sinister weapon, And with the upgrades, he got a new purpose, a new name, and buried his past life so deep he never spoke of it again. In the real world, Tarn's actual identity wasn't revealed until much later. And before that reveal, writer James Roberts had a little fun with the fandom over who exactly Tarn was, carefully planting seeds pointing towards a completely different character. A red herring, if you will. So, back to Roller. And no, despite the name, this isn't the chirpy little R2-D2-ish drone deployed by Optimus Prime's trailer in the original toy and cartoon. IDW's Roller was a completely separate, fully developed character with his own personality. That said, there is a connection. That drone was named after this Roller, a close friend of Pax who served alongside him in the Cybertronian police force, and who also happened to transform into a multi-wheeled transport. Anyway, the seeds were planted with Roller vanishing under mysterious circumstances. Someone roughly the same size and silhouette as Tarn, and an insecure individual secretly dependent on an addictive stimulant, not unlike Tarn's own addictive personality. And it worked. The fandom did the math, and we were all convinced Optimus Prime's best friend fell so far he became Megatron's most devoted attack dog. Now, that's the kind of gut punch twist you build a whole arc around. And it would have been perfect, except it wasn't. When Tarn was finally unmasked, it wasn't Roller. Roller was alive and well, reintroduced in that very same issue, completely unconnected to any of it. And somewhere out there, Roberts was probably laughing his ass off at all of us with the whole, "Ha ha, gotcha." To say a lot of us were disappointed with Tarn's true identity, swapped from Optimus's best friend turned monster to some random nobody in the background, is an understatement. That's a gut punch that lands very differently. In fact, you could argue it completely misses. But the more you think about it, I don't think we give Roberts enough credit. This wasn't just him pulling a fast one on us to make us feel stupid. Okay, it kind of was. But it was more than that too. I think this was the right call, for a reason that's more disturbing than the fake-out would have been. If Tarn had been Roller, this basically becomes a story about a great character falling, a tragic hero corrupted. A story we've heard before. The point Roberts was making, I think, is that Tarn wasn't a fallen hero. At least in his own eyes, he was never anybody in the first place. He was a broken, discarded nobody who got handed an ideology to fill a hole where an identity should have been, and he grabbed it with both remaining claws and never let go. Megatron didn't corrupt a hero. He weaponized a victim. And that's the cycle this whole war runs on. Trauma as the birthplace of radicalization. The victim becomes the corruptor. After his transformation, Tarn left a whole lot of victims of his own in his destructive wake, right from the very start. Well before the DJD was even a thing, the newly minted Tarn served as commandant of the Decepticon prison, Grindcore, where you could say he honed his execution craft, marching poor Cybertronians into a smelting chamber while cranking the Empyrean suite at full volume to drown out the screams. Petty, deliberate cruelty dressed up as keeping things civilized. It's during this time that the Autobot Skids, a prisoner of Grindcore himself, unfortunately gets thrown into the picture. Not literally into the smelting chamber, but into a fate some would argue is worse. Recognizing Skids as a former comrade, a fellow outlier and 0.1%er, Tarn conned him into using his super learning ability to fix the teleportation chamber, really the smelting chamber, promising 50 prisoners would go free if Skids helped. Skids believed him, and Skids was happy to help, proud of the good he thought he was doing. And when Skids was done, Tarn sent all 50 into the chamber and made Skids watch as the machine he'd personally repaired melted everyone inside into raw material, including Skids' own cellmate, purely to shatter what was left of the guy's faith in anything good. As if the execution itself wasn't enough, he needed to attach a little psychological torture and unleash it on a former comrade too. And that was just the start. Once the Decepticon Justice Division was formed and unleashed, the legend of the DJD, and Tarn specifically, began to grow in the hearts and nightmares of every Decepticon. The Boogeyman and his crew, ready to come to get you the moment you stepped out of line. Now, all the major exploits of the DJD were covered in Part 1, which I'm assuming you've already watched. If you haven't, go ahead and do so. I'll drop a link in the description below. You can find it right after the link to the sponsor of this channel, toyhacks.com. Your go-to destination for premium stickers and label upgrade sets that take your Transformer toys to the next level. And yes, they've actually got some cool stuff for Tarn too, because even a guy who already looks this good can look even better all hacked up as himself, or converted into G2 Soundwave, or Stalker. Make the most out of your Tarn toy or any other Transformers in your collection. Toy Hacks has you covered. Like I said, the link will be in the description, so go check them out. After years of serving as the strong arm of the Decepticons' merciless disciplinary and policing wing, Tarn's commitment to the cause would be put to the ultimate test. One that the most feared leader of the DJD almost didn't survive. Because what do you do when your entire religion collapses in real time? When the God you swore complete loyalty to, the one you modeled your entire existence around, renounces Decepticonism and denounces everyone still fighting in its name. What do you do when your leader tells you there was never anything special about the Decepticons, that you were wrong to ever assert yourselves over anyone? What do you do when the one person you look to for guidance, for answers, tells you he has none, that he never did? What the hell do you do when the individual who inspired you to take up arms and go to war now tells you to lay them down, that the war is over and it's time to move on? What do you do? For Tarn to hear all of this, to call it a crisis of existence would be the understatement of the year. Tarn would not move on. So, he decided to stop, to end it all right there, to end his meaningless existence by overdosing his body with the unstable energy source he and his crew had grown hopelessly addicted to. The same fuel that carried them across the galaxy on their macabre missions. He'd hoped to use it to end his own life, until salvation arrived in the most unusual form imaginable. The newest member of the DJD, the diminutive Nickel, staring at him through the glass of his own overdose chamber. Seeing her stopped him cold. Nickel wasn't some lifelong soldier hardened by the war. She was a survivor, someone who'd watched her own world get wiped out by the same organic threats the Decepticons had always warned about. And she'd chosen this cause anyway, on her own, with nothing forcing her hand. And at that moment, Tarn realized the cause was never about Megatron. It was bigger than him. It always had been. And so Tarn found a new mission, allying with the rogue Decepticon warlord Deathsaurus and setting out to do the unthinkable, hunt down and execute the god who made him. Which brings us to the final chapter of Tarn's story, the ultimate showdown with Megatron. Tarn, his new ally, and their combined army track and trap Megatron and his Autobot crew in a fortress on the planet of Necroworld. But rather than storm the fortress with their superior numbers, ever the one for drama, Tarn pulls his forces back, informing the good guys of his return at sunset. Because why kill someone quickly when you can let them marinate in their own dread first? Then Megatron called. Tarn agreed to meet him alone. Megatron offered a trade, his own surrender, in exchange for everyone else walking free. And face to face with the bot he'd built his entire identity around, Tarn didn't feel triumph. He felt sick, disgusted at how far his god had fallen. He beat Megatron half to death right there, with the latter refusing to defend himself, let alone fight back. And just when Tarn was about to finish the job, another Decepticon, Overlord, suddenly shows up, insisting the kill was his. The two started fighting each other over who got to be the executioner, and Megatron was rescued in the chaos. That failure broke something in Tarn when his fellow DJD member Kaon showed up soon after with news that the Autobots had captured the DJD's pet, begging Tarn to organize a rescue. Tarn didn't hesitate to kill Kaon on the spot, ripping his head and spine from his body, his own teammate, because in the moment, any trace of compassion in his own ranks looked exactly like the weakness that had ruined Megatron. If feeling anything was how a true believer became a traitor, Tarn was done feeling anything. At sundown, Tarn led the final assault, the Imperium suite blasting across the battlefield like his own personal funeral march. He tore through the Autobot forces, ripped Ravage clean in half, and cornered a wounded, disarmed Megatron. This was it, the execution he'd been building towards his whole miserable existence. Except, it wasn't an execution. It was a trap. In what felt to Tarn like one final act of cowardice, Megatron threw up a force field to buy himself time. Tarn and his men slowly breached it, and the moment they stepped inside, the trap was sprung. The force field wasn't there to keep the DJD out. It was there to keep them in, with their executioner. Megatron had spent years engineering a way to tap into a black hole for raw antimatter power, and he unleashed it on the DJD, killing them one by one, calling each of them by the name they discarded the moment they joined his cause. Tarn, of course, was saved for last. Megatron ripped the mask right off his face and placed it over his own chest. Both of them, he declared, would die as Decepticons that day. And just like his men before him, Tarn didn't die as Tarn. Megatron called him by his real name. Not Tarn, not even Damas, but Glitch, the name he most associated his own nothingness, the self-insulting name he'd christened himself with after the corrupt Senate broke him all those years ago. Tarn begged, then postured, the same two moves he'd watched countless victims try on him right before he killed them. And it worked about as well for him as it ever had for them. Megatron didn't linger. He told Glitch that everything he'd ever done had been for nothing, and erased him. The god who made him was also the one who ended him, which might be the most fitting death Tarn could have gotten. He spent his entire existence defined by another bot's cause, another bot's name, another bot's mask, and in the end, he didn't even get to die as Tarn. He died as Glitch, the nobody he'd spent his whole life trying to bury. And with that, the story of Tarn ended where it all began, on the comic book page. Which brings us back to the question I raised at the very start of this video. As far as brand new characters introduced into established franchises go, how did Tarn succeed where so many others, like this beach ball droid and even his little cone-headed sidekick, this star-spangled winged Avenger, or even this apparent woman-at-arms, failed so miserably? If you ask me, and yes, the mask played a big part, visuals can be incredibly powerful. At the end of the day, it really came down to execution. Writer James Roberts didn't have Tarn barge in through a wall Shockmaster style, screaming, "Look at me, I'm so awesome, so cool, and so deadly." He bided his time. Before Tarn and the DJD ever appeared in person, their reputation was already doing the heavy lifting, established almost entirely through what other characters said and feared, rather than anything shown on the page. We hear about a gifted Autobot physician driven to murdering his own patients just to keep his hospital off their radar. We hear ex-Decepticons say flatly that they'd rather die than face them. Roberts let all that atmosphere do the work, stacking up curiosity, anticipation, and dread before even putting the DJD on the page. And when they finally showed up, they were never in your face about it. At least I didn't think so. Unlike most villains of the week who show up, menace everybody for an arc, and vanish once the story's over, the DJD never got that treatment because they were never treated as a single arc's problem. They were a constant, looming threat for over a decade of comics. While Autobots and Decepticons fought their war, it was basically business as usual for the DJD, showing up, doing their job, disappearing, and then showing up again right when you'd let your guard down. And that constant menace only worked because of who was standing at the front of it. Every other member of the DJD takes their cue from Tarn. His obsession with procedure becomes their obsession with procedure. His fanaticism sets the temperature for the whole room. Take away the leader and you've got 4 scary designs with cool gimmicks. Keep him and suddenly the whole team feels like it's part of something bigger than itself, which ironically is exactly what Tarn always claimed to believe. That staying power meant Tarn didn't just live on in the comic pages. He made it out into other corners of the franchise, which almost never happens for a character with this specific of an origin story. In the mobile strategy game Transformers Earth Wars, Tarn shows up brandishing his signature ability, fittingly named Outlier Wave, a squad-wide buff that boosts every ally around him, tailored to whatever role they play in the fight. In other words, Squad Commander who empowers fanatics isn't just a comic book theme, it's literally his gameplay function. And true to form, even in a mobile game, Tarn's still doing what Tarn does best, hunting traitors. At one point in the game's story content, he's brought to Earth to track down a rogue Megatron and his Predacons, assembling a brand new DJD squad just for the job. Tarn also made the jump to animation in Transformers Cyberverse, though given his character's nature and the show's slightly younger audience, the concept got a reframe. Instead of an individual, Tarn becomes something almost more unsettling, a template, a mass-produced drone design used by an alternate universe Megatron to build an army of soulless, identical soldiers, which, if you think about it, is a pretty clever twist on the erasure of self theme that is central to the DJD, just scaled up from one guy to an entire army. Then, one drone breaks free of the mind control, takes the name Tarn for himself, and decides his creator wasn't ambitious enough. This version has zero loyalty to anybody, pure burn it all down and rule the ashes energy. And it takes Soundwave, ironically the original Decepticon the fandom had pegged as the one whose face matched their symbol, sacrificing himself to stop him. And Tarn's popularity goes far beyond the comic page, the games, and the screen. Despite the glaring problem of Hasbro producing toys of Decepticon characters who transform into torture and execution devices, Tarn still managed to break through into plastic immortality anyway. Tarn's toy journey is basically a case study in the fans wanted it so bad the toy companies had no choice. After over a decade of demand, Hasbro finally delivered with their Legacy Evolutions Voyager Tarn in 2023. And by most accounts, they nailed it. Working directly off Alex Milne's original art, Hasbro and Takara designers faithfully translated that design into plastic and pulled out all the stops. No shortcuts here. The plastic feels genuinely solid, and they even threw in extra finger articulation, an honor usually reserved for major characters like Prime or Megatron, which in its own way quietly confirms Tarn's status as a major character in the Transformers universe. And Hasbro's gotten more mileage out of this mold as well, recoloring it as Cyberverse Universe Tarn, retooling it into Bludgeon, and most recently a heavily reworked Sentinel Prime. To date, Tarn is the only DJD member officially released by Hasbro, and while fan demand was most likely the main driver, it didn't hurt that he's also the only DJD member who doesn't transform into a weapon or torture device. That said, while the Cybertronian tank alt mode is nice, if you ask me, it wasn't really necessary. Tarn's robot mode was always where the design lived and breathed. And to prove that point, plenty of other companies released officially licensed versions of Tarn that ditched the transformation gimmick entirely. And yes, I know a transformer that doesn't transform is a polarizing idea in this fandom. But when you look this good, no, this menacing, do you really need him to transform? In 2018, we got arguably the most sophisticated Tarn ever produced, thanks to Flame Toys, as part of their Kuru Karakuri line, a premium non-transforming die-cast action figure with light-up LED units and a detachable mask built for pure display shelf menace. And of course, priced accordingly. So for those on a budget, Super 7 released their Ultimates version in 2022, a simpler sculpt whose real selling point was the accessories: extra hands, extra head, and nickel. Her inclusion is fitting. Despite her cutesy-wootsy look clashing aesthetically with the rest of the DJD, she's the one who single-handedly pulled Tarn back from his own self-destruction. That being said, I don't think anyone but completionists would line up for a standalone nickel figure to begin with, so pack-in accessory is apt. She'd go on to accompany her leader in the next two premium Tarn model kits, the first from YOLO Park's AMK series in 2025, and later from Blocky's Action Edition line. And for anyone who wants a tiny Tarn for their desk, Blocky's also has you covered with their entry-level Galaxy version. And finally, no Transformers toy discussion is complete without talking third-party releases. While Hasbro was still debating the pros and cons of releasing toys for what was essentially a Decepticon execution squad for the kiddies, third-party company Mastermind Creations, or MMC for short, beat everyone to the punch, releasing the first official, unofficial Tarn toy, dubbed Kultur, back in 2016. Fully articulated, fully transformable, and with a neat Easter egg, a removable mask revealing roller underneath. Yes, I know, completely inaccurate, but most likely this toy was in production well before Tarn's real identity was ever revealed in the comics. MMC kind of made up for that unintentional inaccuracy by later releasing a repainted Asterisk Mode Kultur as a 2017 TFCon exclusive, a fun, fictitious take on an Autobot-themed version of Tarn, right down to an Autobot insignia mask that could also be removed, revealing a newly resculpted head of Glitch underneath. So I guess you could call that a what-if alternate take. And speaking of alternate takes, in 2021, MMC also released this. Yeah, I mean, one could argue Tarn's design had a sort of sexiness to it, but I guess MMC took that literally with their Eris Kultur. Okay, yes, I'm aware there's a very real portion of the fandom that digs stuff like this. Hey, we like what we like. But to their credit, MMC put in the effort and built out an entire original backstory to explain this release. Eris is her own character, an outlier born with the ability to mimic any fighter's combat style. Eris deliberately molds herself to look like the deadliest warlords and champions she idolizes. So there you go. Less gender-swapped Tarn and more unrelated character cosplaying as Tarn for her own in-universe reasons. A weirdly elaborate workaround, but let's give them points for creativity. Speaking of which, our last unofficial Tarn comes from Iron Factory. Dub may be small given his Legends class size, but this tiny Tarn makes up for it with the unique ability to merge with his fellow spirits of the DEC, Decepticon Enforcement Corps, for copyright reasons, to form a sort of Mega Tarn. No real narrative reason for it, just Iron Factory flexing, hoping to set the fandom on fire with excitement. And speaking of fire, have you heard about the Autobot Jet, best known for setting the sky afire? Okay, maybe not literally, but you know what I mean. If you want to know more about the Autobot Air Guardian turned scientist Jetfire, or is that Skyfire, I've got his story here. Or if you want to rewatch part 1 covering the rest of the DJD team, that's linked here too. Either way, thanks for watching and I hope to hear from you in the comments below. Go ahead and tell me your story.